Well, let's see. I'm trying to think back then.
Uh,
Probably the biggest, one of the things my grandmother told me and my mother was horse racing on the lake. And I mean, I've never seen it. That was all done before, after I was born. And like I grew, my grandmother used to take me on the horse and sleigh and the wagon and that. And back, I was only a little tight then, but I remember that. I recollect that. And working on the farm as a kid. I mean, I was growing up, like I used to do the churn. Like that was one of the things. That's going back ways. And milk the cows. That was another big thing. And farming was not an easy task back then. I mean, you milk cows every day and gardens and haymaking, and then going to the woods to get wood, and that was another big chore for we were only young kids. I mean, we had to pitch in. So but I'd say farming was the biggest thing that kept us going. Like my dad would get odd jobs here and there, but farming was the main. We lived off the vegetables, the cows and pigs, horse. I mean, sheep. I remember my dad would every fall he'd butcher a cow, a pig, and a sheep, and he'd probably sell half of it and then keep the other half, and it would be frozen. Once the frost would set in, it would freeze, and then in the spring when the spring thaw came, then you'd make big puncheons of brine and put all the pork and beef in separate barrels, and you'd be eating salt pork and salt beef after that for your meals. But oh no, it was still good. I can remember that. I don't know how healthy it was, but it was good.
what about your grandparents? Tell us something.
My grandmother died when I was on my dad's side when I was only maybe. Well, we were still living in Inverness.
Oh, yeah.
So she died. I was only maybe 4. I could very, very poor memory of her, other than going to the hospital. My grandfather on my dad's side, I remember quite a bit about him. He worked the coal mines all his life, and then he ended up moving to Toronto because one of my dad's sisters lived in Toronto, so he went and stayed with them. So I didn't really get to know him that much, other than a little bit when he came in the summertime to visit. But I remember one thing that really stuck in my mind when he was a good carver, and he carved us a boat when we were kids, and I often wonder what happened to that boat. But we used to have go down the water like that, whatever, and that was one of the biggest memories of my grandfather. Now on my mother's side, that's one of the reasons we end up moving up here. My grandfather on my mother's side ended up going blind and crippled. And so my mother talked my dad into moving up to the farm here to help out my grandmother and take care of my grandfather. I don't know how enthused my dad was leaving the Inverness, but anyway, that's where we ended up. And I was 5 years old when we made the big move. And my mother ended up taking care of my grandfather until he passed. And my grandmother, she lived quite a ways after. I forget what year she died. I can't for sure right now. It was in the early 80s, I think, or late 70s. But my grandmother, she was good to me. She took good care of us. And I'll tell you a story. I remember one time we were still living in Inverness. I was about 4 years old. And all of a sudden I decided I wanted to come visit my grandmother. And I don't know where my mother was at doing something in the house. So I take off down the road. And I don't know if you're familiar with Inverness. When you go up the hill to Inverness, I went down there, and then for some reason, I turned to go up the banks instead of going out Route 19. And I still remember that because I was only about 4 years old. I remember I got halfway up the banks, and there was a bunch of guys there. They had a flat tire in their car, and they stopped me and said, "Where are you going?" And I said I was going to visit my grandmother. And I don't know what happened after that, but I know they took me in the car and brought me back to my mother. My mother was having a fit, wondering where I was at. But yeah, that was. But I said, you know, that's kind of stuck in my memory. And you know, usually when you're that young, you lose a lot of your. But that was.
That's a memory.
Yeah, that's a good memory. Yeah. Yes. But I remember coming to the farm and the hens and I mean, I wasn't used to hens and sheep and the all the horses and the cows and all that, and that was a big change there. And at that time too, my dad was just starting to add on to the old farmhouse, because it was just for two people at one time at that time, So and we were he started adding on. You put one piece and one, then another piece, and eventually it became a fairly big house for us. But there wasn't much room when we first moved, and like every farm, everybody farmed. I mean, those farms almost around the whole lake, and there was probably anywhere between 3 to 6 children in every family, and everybody kind of, everybody knew everybody. I mean, that was one thing, and you got to be friends. I mean, like I went to school. It was a one-room school, like Hamilton School. It was up about a mile up the road, and you went from, I guess it was grade primer back then, I think, all the way to grade 12. And I think it was grade 11 and 12, they did it by correspondence. And then the teacher that was there, she handled everybody right through all the different grades. And then, but by the time I reached grade 9, then they started transporting us to Inverness. So from 9 on, we took the school bus to Inverness. So. But that was a big memory, going to the one-room schoolhouse and playing, and and all the teachers and I got to know a lot of people. You meet a lot of. I mean, back then it was unbelievable, all the different. I mean, like I said, every family had 3, 4, 5 kids, and everybody was friends back then. Yeah. Yeah, but well, back then church was a big thing. Back then, that's I remember like going to my mother would my dad would take us to church, and my grandmother, and I mean, all the pews were full. I mean, and there was 2 churches there. We were in the United Church, and there was a Presbyterian church, and both churches were pretty well full. I mean, that was a big outing on Sunday, and. Another thing, well, the school, there's always something going on there, and sometimes it'd be, I don't know, how would you say it, milling frolics. You'd see them at some of the houses that have them, and weddings were held in the houses back then. That was a big meeting thing, and everybody was invited in the community, so.
Okay.
And let's see, what else was there? I remember, like, when you was talking about the community, I don't know if you're familiar with Scottsville. It's only 2 miles down the road. I mean, that was a big trip for us back then. Go down to the store at Scottsville. And going to Inverness was a major thing too. But all my dad's side of the family was in Inverness at that time, So, and my dad would go in to visit and that, and we didn't have a vehicle when we first moved up here, so, and I remember my dad, the first vehicle we had was a 51 International truck, and that was the first vehicle we had, and then we started getting around a little bit anyway, going to Inverness or whatever. Yeah, but my grandmother used to go to Inverness with the horse and wagon. I never really, the most I went with her when it was either down to Scottsville or up to what there used to be Angus McKay's store up at where the United Church sat. And walking was a lot of you mostly walked everywhere. And but or if somebody else had, there was some vehicles in the community at that time, and somebody would give you a ride or whatever, take you into town or. Well, I remember like playing. I mean, this one story. I remember we used to have races. Well, I'd start on one side, and the other fellow would start, and they would race around and see if we could get back to the starting point. And I remember Neil Harold, because we didn't see each other, and we bang, right into each other. We were both laying on the ground. I consider we're seeing stars for a while. I remember that. That was a big thing. And playing ball, we used to play ball too with the as kids, and ball hockey too. That was another thing.
You say ball, I mean baseball.
Yeah, about sponge ball. Like it used to, and it was rubber ball. You know, like I think they were red and white or something. I mean, but no, never a baseball. I probably never seen a baseball until I was. Used to play, growing up though. As I got older, we used to play a lot of softball. Like we had a team here in Scottsville at one time. Yes. And then I moved to Windsor. But no, softball was a big thing, and every community had a softball team at one time here. Well, other than swimming, and we used to make a raft almost every spring after the ice would get off, would gather up all the junk wood along the shore and would make a raft. And my mother would be terrified that we're going to drown. Sometimes she didn't know we had one down there, but and fishing. I loved fishing as a kid growing up, but I didn't do much fishing in the lake other than ice fishing in the spring when the season opened. But the brooks, oh no, I'd live in the brooks when I was a kid. If there wasn't anything going on, that's where I'd be in So there's a lot of different brooks here, and nice speckled trout.
So those rafts, you would build them up driftwood and just.
That's it, yeah.
And then what? Just
go up and have a long pole and go up along the shore or down that way, and we were very careful that we didn't go out too far when it went beyond the height of the pole.
That's we'll have a lake that's so shallow.
Yeah, but like I say, I know off here, I think it's about 30 feet when you get out a ways. And as you go down that way, it's very shallow, and there's a lot of shallow spots in there. Like if you're even power boats with the outboard motors on them, they got to be careful. You know, they'll break their props there if they don't know the lake that well. Well, my two brothers and I, we got along. You know, as kids, I mean, we have little quarrels here and there, but we got along good, and working on the farm, playing whatever, and I had a few close friends here that we used to do a lot, either play ball or ball hockey or take shots as we call it, and play cops and robbers or whatever at one time, and we could be in the woods a lot. Like I think back then, I mean, we were only 6 or 7 years old. We'd be out in the woods like it was nothing, or down at the lake. Nowadays, they won't even, they walk the kid to the end of the road to the driveway. I mean, we had freedom. It was unbelievable back then. I mean, but I guess there was wasn't as many worries back then as there was this now. But a few buddies, Clifford Collins and I used to go fishing a lot, and Donnie Pauline's wife would fish a lot, and but you know what? When I look back, I said a lot of my friends are gone. I mean, that's unbelievable when you start thinking of all the people that have passed since we were kids. So we're actually the older generation now.
How old?
I was 18, but when I left here to go to Windsor, I turned 19, and I left here in August. Then I turned 19 in October in Windsor, and been there ever since.
Yes.
Until I moved back here in 2010. And I don't regret that. No, the city's nice, but you can't beat the living here. The scenery's unbelievable. Yeah, I was just trying to remember some childhood stories that I can relate to. And one of them I remember is, this wasn't too long after we moved up from Inverness. And my brother and I, we were pushing my other brother in a carriage above the house. And all of a sudden there was a snake came across in front of us. So we left the carriage and the snake and took off running. And my other brother's screaming, with the snake right there. I mean, it wasn't near him, but it was right on the ground below him. And my grandmother came running out of the house. What's wrong? What's wrong? And then she seen Reggie, that's my brother Reggie. We left in the carriage. She seen Reggie and then the snake. And my grandmother was, what'd you say? She hated snakes, and she ended up killing the snake at that time. And I remember that. The thing I remember the most about that incident was there was all that was left of the snake was about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches of tail, and it was sitting on the ground there, and it was still kind of, I don't know what it was, little moving of that. My grandmother boiled a kettle of water and came out with it and poured it on on the tail so it would quit moving. That's how horrified she was for what she hated about snakes. Another story was I remember, I don't know if I should say this, but anyway, I came up, when we moved up, we were up visiting here, and I was about maybe 4 at the time. And they had a dog named Dixie, and the dog was kind of deaf, gone deaf, and I was running, and he was laying down, and I tripped over him. And all of a sudden, the dog bit me twice on the arm like that, and my grandmother seen that, and I don't know if you want. That was too bad. You know, the dog was blind. It wasn't his fault. He was just after going deaf and blind and probably wasn't used to kids. Anyway, that was another story. And a lot of the people here I got to know over the years, and there's a lot of good friends here. I mean, people. This community is very open to helping people. You know what I mean? If somebody's, dying of something or needs help or stuff like that, everybody helps out. You know, that's one thing I notice about the community. And I don't know. I guess it's very quiet here. You know what I mean? You don't have any loud screeching of tires and sirens and like the city is. I mean, at nighttime you can hear a pin drop here, which is great. And it gets dark. I mean, you can't look out at the stars and everything. Oh, I mean, it's unbelievable, yeah. Compared to I lived in the city. And I don't know. I guess the people and the scenery are probably the two most important things here. And your family is most important all the time. And unfortunately, our kids are all spread over Canada, so we only get to see them once a year or whatever. But I wouldn't trade this for nothing. And the city is convenient, but this here you can't beat this. I came home every summer for either 2 or 3 weeks, depending what vacation I can get, and it was always hard to leave. I'd have a lump in my throat, going down the driveway and heading out, and it was always on my mind to come back. And then finally, my mother ended up giving me this piece of property here. There's a little over 3.5 acres. So she gave me that as a present one year, and so then we ended up putting a mini home here and moving back. So that was in 2010. So that's 14 years ago. I remember when my wife first decided to move here. She said, "I'm not going to have any friends or nothing," you know what I mean? But now she's got more friends than I have. I mean, it's unbelievable how she fitted in, and I worked a little bit. I worked part time for David McLean, there part time, and so. And right now, I there's enough to keep me going now. I don't even want to do that anymore. So I'm between a little bit of gardening and fishing and a little bit of golfing, and I still play hockey in the winter. So yeah, we got in Inverness. There's a 55 and over group of guys. We play pickup every Monday and Thursday morning. So that I still can bend down to tie my skates. So I go out there. Try not to kill myself. But that's a lot. It's unbelievable. You think back, what kind of a life you're going to have in the rural area? There's nothing, but it's unbelievable how many things go on. Yeah, the McDonald House reflects back on what it used to like to live here back in the day. I mean, there's a lot of artifacts in the McDonald House that relate to back in the, the early 1900s, and well, some before the 1900s and through the years, and the house itself is it's all the original inside, and everything is back when the people lived there, eh? And there used to be a post office there at one time. I remember going there as a kid on Halloween, so I can still recollect that because we're going Halloween. So I remember going up there, and if I remember, Danny Han, I think, was the name of the gentleman, and his wife. They lived there, and he had a big wash tub in the center of the floor, put water and apples in, and we made his bob for apples. And I remember doing that. I don't know how old we were, maybe 11, maybe 12. But I can remember the people that lived there. So, and we get in the summertime, it's only open for 2 months out of the year, and we that provides jobs for students in the area. So for summer jobs, and there's a lot of tourists. A lot of people come here tracing their roots, eh? And sometimes the McDonald House will be able to help them, but we don't have a lot of genealogy there. But I did give them a lot of genealogy. My brother did a lot of genealogy, and I gave them some of that stuff to, if people came, they could maybe look at something they could find, and every year we have an open house, and it's free to go in there, and there's a lot of history there as far as what the implements, like tools and equipment that people used back in the day, like when they had used to grow grain crops and then to trash the grain to get the oats and whatever. And a lot of the old horse and buggies are in there, and plows and wagons and stuff like that people used back in the day.
Gosh.
His son, Charlie, was the one that donated the house and property to us, and they lived on the other side of the road. And see, wasn't involved that much when it first got donated. I was living in Windsor, Ontario, and the people that originally were doing it was one. I think Edward Campbell was one of and Chris Campbell. And then some of the other people in the community were the main people that got it situated. And there's also a building on there. It's a schoolhouse, a one-room schoolhouse they brought from Trinrock Valley to the site to give you an idea what it was like to go to school in a one-room school, eh? And they used to have back in the day. I might be here on vacation, and they'd have an open house there that have all the machinery going. I remember the trashing mill that have that set up where they could do it, and they'd have a milling frolic, and then they had another thing that ran a big saw that ran power, so was ran on a belt off a tractor, and that was back in the day that you just demonstrate that. But as time has gone on, other than the membership has really dwindled. Like a lot of these people have died off, and then the few of the members are just getting old, where they just can't do anything anymore. Eh? And we keep trying to get younger members, but there's just too many interests in the community for them to get involved in it. Eh? So, but it's still very interesting. If you're interested in how people lived back in the day or the history of the community, there's a lot to learn to go up there. So,
I agree.
For one thing, if you like mountains and water, you're not going to beat that. I mean, the lake is surrounded by mountains, and there's a lake right in the middle of it. And the only thing that I kind of regret now is that the farms didn't stay here. Now a lot of it's growing in, so you don't get to realize what actually went on here back in the day. But still, the scenery is unbelievable, and the fishing is relatively good here. Depending on if you want to bass fish, there's smallmouth bass in the lake now, and they're a good sport fish. And speckled trout. There's still lots of speckled trout. If you're willing to be patient and tramp the brooks, you'll get them. And there's lots of perch. Nobody ever, they seem to be kind of a garbage fish to everybody. They say if the perch are biting, I'm leaving. I'm not staying there. Yes, you were talking about striped bass before. There is a few striped bass in the lake now. I think they follow the Gaspro when they come up the river. So the lake is full of Gaspro at this time of year. There's a ton of Gaspro in there, but they end up going back to the ocean. Well, as growing up as a kid, there was farming was the big thing for me. I mean, milking the cows. I mean, doing the churn, making the butter, and separating the milk. I mean, I remember doing the afterward milk. You'd put this big bowl and separator with milk would go in there, and then you'd turn it, and it would separate the cream from the milk. And I was good at that. Some of my brothers would do it, and if you weren't a steady turn, you'd get the discs inside would all start vibrating like crazy. And the churn, I remember doing the churn. That was a long process, but boy, the butter was good though. I remember that. Oh yeah, my mother. I remember my son. We were visiting here, and but there were still my other brother was still had cows, and they were still making butter, and he'd take the butter and he'd slice it off. He wouldn't go like that. He just loved the homemade butter. I mean, you can't beat the homemade butter. It's And another thing I remember as a kid was we used to sell the cream. After you get so much, you could put it in a big creamery thing and put it at the road, and they'd come by and pick up the steel cans. And I remember going back to get when they'd bring back the empties, they'd put a little ticket in it, deciding what the grade of the cream was, say. And I remember the first thing we'd look is the ticket to see, because the better the grade, the higher the price you get for your cream, eh?
Damn.
So I remember, I forget there was a blue, red, I forget now how they were, what each represented, but I can still remember looking for the what color the ticket was. Because then I'd go home and show my parents, oh, we got a blue ticket or a red ticket or whatever. And another thing was the sheep. It was in the spring we'd get the sheep would start lambing, and every year we ended up probably with at least one or two pet lambs where the sheep couldn't support and we'd end up feeding them. And the biggest thing I remember about that is at the end of the year, my dad would sell the lambs, and I remember the pet lamb going down. We'd be all crying, losing the poor pet lamb. It was good. We'd feed it every day, and it would depend on us, and that was a major thing in our lives. But that was part of the way it was. You had no choice. And then the shearing of the sheep. I remember I tried to shear, but I'd end up cutting the skin, so I wasn't very good at that. So I left that to my dad or my other brother. So I don't know what else. That's about it I can think of right now. I suppose after you leave, there'll be lots of stuff come when I say this.
This is funny.
Well, I was just going to tell you a story about, we used to have a big plow horse called Dick. And one time I was doing something around I was leading him or something. I was only maybe 11 or 10 or 11 at the time. And he ended up standing on my foot. And I could not budge him to get off my foot. And I'm hollering away. My dad comes running, what's wrong with you? And I told him about Dick. He saw me, so my dad got him off my foot. That was, I remember that. And then our family was fairly musical. Like my dad was a very good mouth organ player. He, a lot of the old Scottish tunes, he were really good at that. And my mother played the fiddle somewhat, but as she got older, she just never kept it up. And my other brother, he was a very good piano player because he played at all the churches and funerals, and he chorded for a lot of the fiddle players over the years too. And my other brother Reggie, he was a decent guitar player, but he never kept it up. And myself, I don't know, it just went right over my head. The music wasn't there, and but I was more sports minded than the music. So, and Oh yeah, I remember, if you can add, we used to have a dog in Windsor, our family dog Jake, and we really couldn't keep him in the city. So I ended up flying him down here to my brother. And Jake, he liked to wander. You had to be careful. If you didn't keep an eye on him, he'd take off. And it was funny. Some of the people, I knew who the dog was, and they'd hop in the car, and would all of a sudden would see a car coming up the driveway. Jake sitting in the back of the car, proud as can be. He'd get out, and he and that happened in the city. That's why we hit. If you didn't watch, he'd take off and it'd be water. When the dog catcher found him in downtown Windsor, and she brought him home because she knew there was a thing on him that had where he lived at. And she said, I couldn't put this dog in the pound. She said he was too friendly and nice, and I tracked to where he lived at. So she brought him home to us.
That's like quite a character.
Oh yeah, Jake, he was a good dog, but he was friendly. I mean, he'd go with you. You say you get friendly, and and he was. One thing I remember, he was horrified of lightning and thunder. He'd start lightning and thunder, and he'd be just shaking like a leaf. Oh, ah, he was terrified of that. Another story about Jake is my mother had what do you call it, ear problem where her balance would go out of whack, and one time she couldn't get out of bed up, and so we called an ambulance. So Jake's asleep. He had his own bed in the hallway going in towards my mother's bedroom. He's sound asleep when the ambulance guys come up the stairs, went in my mother's room, took her out into the ambulance. Jake never even moved. I said, what a watchdog you are. I can't think of anything else you want to, unless you got a